Alright, so I guess we're finally gonna talk about it. The Last Jedi. The Star Wars prequels. Two of the most contentious topics on the entire internet. Here goes. The year is 2019. As of now, it's been nearly 15 years since Revenge of the Sith left theaters and the prequel trilogy concluded. That means we're living in a post-Star Wars prequels world. People my age and younger can't really imagine a Star Wars without the prequel trilogy. Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan, and General Grievous, and Padme Amidala, the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, and the I Have the High Ground scene, and yes, even Jar Jar Binks. All of these things are permanently infused into the millennial perception of what Star Wars is, and there's not much going back on that. I have an up and down relationship with the prequels. For me, most of those tired and overused complaints that the blocking is bad, the CGI is bad, the green screen is bad, Jar Jar is annoying, still prove to be pretty true upon the rewatch. But as the millennium baby that I am, I can't really see Star Wars without the prequels. It's part of what Star Wars is. Maybe it's because I grew up having the prequel lore drilled into my head through toys and video games, but the nostalgia is so strong that even if they're really not that good, my memory of the movies adds volumes to the narrative of the saga. See, here's the thing. I've had the long-standing belief that the Star Wars prequels contain a very rich, nuanced, and multi-layered narrative. The way it's told is just very, very, very messy. Even when I got older and started to see the flaws in the execution, I remember thinking, man, but this is still such a good story. I always wished that someday another Star Wars movie would be able to express the depth that the prequels have on paper and honor their contribution to the Star Wars saga. And then, it happened. I'm here today talking about my favorite scene in a Star Wars movie. It's part of this massive video essay collaboration called Star Wars Define. The playlist is linked below. And it took me a really long time to figure out what I wanted to talk about. At first, I was gonna do Rey's introduction on Jakku in The Force Awakens. Then I was gonna do the asteroid field chase in Empire. Then I was gonna do the Lapti Nek song in Return of the Jedi. No, sorry. Then I was gonna do the Dexter Jetster scene in Attack of the Clones. But then it hit me. The scene in The Last Jedi that totally transformed Star Wars for me. The scene that saved the Jedi and saved the prequels. First, we gotta rewind a bit. Can I just say something crazy? We don't talk enough about how much the Jedi are the worst. And the Star Wars movies don't talk about it much either. Despite their reputation as the obvious good guys in the Star Wars universe, even dating back to the original trilogy, the Jedi have never really been the center of good in the Star Wars series. And yet, most people still think of them that way. So we all know Obi-Wan and Yoda as the wise mentors who guided Luke to be a hero in the original trilogy, but even so, both of them have pretty clear lapses in judgment. Obi-Wan lies to Luke about his father, justifying it with this whole point of view cop-out.
From a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
And Yoda willfully withholds the information about him too. Why? Because they both want to manipulate Luke to kill Vader without knowing he's his son. That doesn't seem very in character with Yoda's other teachings.
A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense. Never attack.
When Luke tries to tell Obi-Wan that he can't kill his father and he wants to try to save him instead,
I can't kill my own father.
Obi-Wan says,
Then the Emperor has already won.
Luke's change of heart and the redemption of Vader ultimately occur not because he listens to the teachings of his Jedi mentors and resorts to violence, but because instead he defies his Jedi mentors with compassion. There's a vague hint, even by the end of the original trilogy, that some of the Jedi way that Luke was taught is a little primitive and outdated. It was valuable, to be sure, but it was also something that he had to grow beyond. And yet, by the time Return of the Jedi comes to a close, the fact that Obi-Wan and Yoda were wrong is never really brought up. They both materialize as Force ghosts at the Ewok party and nod approvingly, even though Luke did the exact opposite of what they told him to do. Weird as it is, we don't really have any closure. Enter the Star Wars prequels. If you thought the Jedi in the original trilogy were a little bit morally questionable, the prequel trilogy turns that up to 11. The Jedi in the prequels rip a small child away from his mother and tell him to never think about her ever again.
That's totally healthy, right?
The Jedi in the prequels judge a person's value in the Force by measuring the number of microscopic magic particles in their blood. The Jedi in the prequels are arrogant and pious and full of superiority complexes. They compromise their whole non-violent Jedi way whenever they want to make an exception. They manipulate people using the Force because they see them as simple-minded. They don't even question when an entire army is mysteriously gifted to them because they're so eager to be militarized. Yoda even commands like troops of soldiers to attack stuff, which feels distinctly not like something the Yoda in the original trilogy would do.
Concentrate all your fire on the nearest starship.
Because they're so drunk on power, the Jedi don't even see the Chancellor manipulating their weaknesses right under their nose. And ultimately, because of their idiocy and arrogance, the Jedi in the prequels all get killed by the army they trusted, and that Padawan they told to repress his emotions turns against them.
Who could have seen this coming?
One of the most common complaints about the prequels upon their release was that the Jedi were idiots. After years of fans mythologizing and idolizing them in the original trilogy, why were the Jedi in the prequels kind of the worst? Lots of fans have attributed this to bad writing or poor characterization or plot holes, but to me, it really seems like the questionable morals of the Jedi in the prequels were supposed to be the point of the trilogy. George Lucas wanted to take something that was clearly black and white, good versus evil, and add some complexity and nuance to it in the backstory. The issue is just that if this was supposed to be the point wasn't very clearly expressed.
Remember, I'm the guy who thinks the Star Wars prequels were pretty brilliant on paper, but just messy in execution.
If George Lucas wanted the Jedi to be the villains, or at least like the anti-heroes of the prequel trilogy, it's unfortunate that most people, and especially kids, never really wanted to view them that way. It's pretty easy to watch the prequel trilogy and just write it off that the Jedi Order failed because Darth Vader defeated them. Sure, Anakin calls out the Jedi and says they're evil, but he's the bad guy. Of course he would say that. He's just lying. Especially when you're a kid, it's hard to even have the thought that the Jedi might have been wrong when all the toys and video games and cartoons pretty clearly paint them as the noble warriors.
The galaxy's most legendary heroes.
All new Episode 2 action figures give you the power of the Jedi.
The chase is on, and the fate of the Jedi is in your hands.
The Clone Wars rage on, and the Jedi are under attack. It's time to send in a new Republic attack shuttle. You can build the Republic gunship to help the Jedi catch him.
So, in the original trilogy, we have two Jedi Masters who make some pretty morally questionable choices and never have them addressed. And in the prequels, we have an entire Jedi Order that falls because of the arrogance of the Jedi. And yet, the problems with the Jedi Order in both trilogies have never been really widely acknowledged in any clear-cut way. Now, none of this really breaks the series, but it just feels kinda weird that none of the characters have ever really mentioned it. Until now. Enter 2017. Enter Old Man Luke. Enter The Last Jedi. The scene begins like this.
Now that they're extinct, the Jedi are romanticized, deified. But if you strip away the myth and look at their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure.
So yeah, Rian Johnson did that.
So in The Last Jedi, we finally meet a Luke who went home and binged the prequel trilogy, and he's kinda shook. Turns out that time Obi-Wan lied to him about his father was just the tip of the iceberg. The Jedi have done far worse than that.
At the height of their powers, they allowed Darth Sidious to rise, create the Empire, and wipe them out. It was a Jedi Master who was responsible for the training and creation of Darth Vader.
And in one broad stroke, The Last Jedi completely recontextualizes the Star Wars prequels. How? By explicitly reframing them not as the story of the heroic Jedi being defeated by the Sith, but instead as the story of the arrogant Jedi inadvertently causing their own demise. The sheer fact of Luke acknowledging the events of the prequels feels like it ties the saga together in a more coherent way than ever before. Rian Johnson remembers these movies exist, he remembers the Jedi failed, and Luke remembers it too. Even Yoda gets a scene later where he finally acknowledges his own failure. I don't know about you, but I think this adds a lot of closure to the open-endedness of Return of the Jedi's ending by showing that Yoda has learned from his mistakes. He's not stuck in the past. He knows the Jedi need to change.
Failed. I have the greatest teacher. Failure is.
Suddenly, because of a tiny reference to the prequels from Luke in this movie, the ongoing story of the Jedi in the Skywalker saga feels like it has a far more complex arc. The prequels present a Jedi Order that has become drunk on power and ultimately falls because of its own hubris. The original trilogy depicts the old guard of the Jedi training a new apprentice to bring back the old ways, but without completely learning from what made them go wrong in the first place. The sequels show Luke realizing that he's perpetuating the same cycle of violence and learning that the Jedi Order has to change. Of course, Luke's total shunning of the Jedi way is not the last word of the movie.
You've probably heard this 100 times from every other analysis of the movie, but I'll say it again. The theme of The Last Jedi is failure and learning from it. Contrary to some interpretations, the message of the movie is not let the past die. Kylo Ren says that. He's the villain.
At the start of the movie, Luke's take on the Jedi is that they need to die. But his mistake is in thinking that the failure of the Jedi's past and the failure of his own past has to define the future. It doesn't. As the film goes on, what Luke will come to realize is that maybe the bravery, the hope, and the heroism that the myth of the Jedi inspire is ultimately more important than their individual failures. Maybe Luke Skywalker, Jedi Master, is a legend, but maybe that legend is more powerful than any single flawed human being could ever be. At the end of The Last Jedi, Luke willfully becomes the legend. Not only does he say goodbye to his sister, challenge his nephew, and save his friends in a non-violent way, but in one foul swoop, he also inspires hope in downtrodden people across the galaxy by standing down the whole First Order alone with his laser sword.
Luke Skywalker.
Skywalker.
Jedi Master.
Jedi Master.
Galaxy may need a legend.
I'm gonna walk out with a laser sword and face down the whole First Order.
What does this even have to do with the prequels? Well, Luke's final resolution at the end of the film feels like it brings the Jedi Order closer to full circle. Through acknowledging the violence and hypocrisy and ego of the Jedi's past, he's able to learn from their mistakes and fight back against the First Order in a peaceful Jedi way, a way that doesn't even involve touching lightsabers, a true Jedi way. Maybe kids today do see the Jedi in the prequels as the good guys. Maybe that's not entirely accurate. Maybe the Jedi kinda suck. But if Episode 8 shows us anything, it might be that the myth is more important than the reality. The Jedi in the prequels may have failed. The Jedi in the original trilogy may have failed. Luke Skywalker himself may have failed. But that doesn't mean they all can't still inspire hope and heroism in kids and adults everywhere, in the world of Star Wars and in our world.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, I would love it if you would share it on social media. That helps so much, and also liking and commenting is great too. As mentioned before, this video is part of a larger collaboration called Star Wars Defined, where a bunch of YouTubers are getting together to make a video about their favorite Star Wars moment. So if you want to join in, you can email your video to Browntable at the email below. Thank you so much for watching this video. Did I say that already? I don't know. And I'm gonna go get to The Rise of Skywalker. I'm really excited and nervous too, so we'll see how that goes. All right, bye.